Alright guys, now in the last lecture we looked at constructor functions and the this keyword. I also pointed out that the date object that we used also used a constructor when we said new date and then whatever we put inside as a parameter or an argument and so on. So there's other core objects that have constructors as well in JavaScript, but most of them are not advisable to use. Okay, for instance, primitive types like strings, numbers, booleans, they can actually be created as objects instead of primitives, and we can do this by using certain constructors like string and number and so on. Now there's not too many reasons why you would want to do this. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't. It slows down execution speed, it's more code, it's confusing, and then you have issues when you're using the triple equals operator and you're trying to compare the value to the value and the type. So even though this is something that you're not going to use a lot, I didn't want to leave it out because you may run into it, and I don't want you to go back in your head and say, well, why didn't Brad mention this in the JavaScript course? So we are going to go over this, but just know that it's not something that you're going to use very often. So let's start with strings. Okay, so when we create a string, we just say, I'm going to call this name1, and we would just set it to a string, just like we've been doing. Let's call him Jeff. All right, so that just sets a primitive value to this variable. Now, we could create this string as an object if we want. So I'm going to call this variable name2, and I'm going to set it to the new keyword, which calls a constructor, and then we're going to call string like that. And we'll pass in Jeff. Okay, so if I console.log name1, we just get Jeff, we get our primitive value. If we console log name2, we're going to get that string as an object. And you can see it just gives us the primitive value as the key and then Jeff as the value. And it gives us this 0j for each letter of the string, or each character of the string. Now, one thing we can do when we use this as an object is we can add properties to it. So for instance, we could say name2.foo equals bar and save, and now you can see it has a property of foo and a value of bar. Now, there's not too many reasons why you would want to do something like this, but just know that you can. Now, where you can run into trouble with this is when you're matching types. So let's take a look at, let's do console log, and we're going to use that type of operator that we used a while ago. And let's look at name1. So if we look at that, let's comment this out. If we look at that, it gives us a string. Okay, simple, it's a primitive value of a string. If we look at 2, it gives us an object. Okay, so name2, even though it's a string, it is an object, it's not a primitive value. So if you have in your code somewhere, let's say if name, we'll do if name1 first of all, is equal to, triple equals to Jeff, then let's console.log yes, and if else, then we'll console log no. Alright, so if we save that, we get yes. So name1 is equal to the string of Jeff. Now let's change this name1 to name2 and save, and we get no. Okay, and the reason for that is because we're checking to see if the value is Jeff, which it is. Name2, the value itself is Jeff, but the type is not equal to a string. Okay, so it's not equal to the string of Jeff. Now, if this were a double equal sign, then we'll get yes because it's just checking the value of Jeff. It's not checking the string type, which that's what it is when it's surrounded in quotes. Okay, so that's where you can run into some issues by using this format here. So you're not going to see this too much, but you might run into it, and I just want you to know what it is. Okay, it's basically a string, but it's an object. It's not a primitive value. Now I just want to run through and give you some examples of some of the other constructors and also just the normal way of creating things like numbers. So we would say const num1 equals 5. Okay, very simple, gives us a primitive number. But we could also do const num2 equals new number 5. Okay, and if we were to console log num2, we get this number object. And if we were to try to look at the type, we get object, not number. All right, we can do the same thing with Boolean. So usually we would say true or false, but we can also say new Boolean true. All right, and if we look at console.log of that bool2 value, we get an object. Okay, if we look at type of, we get an object. Now we can also do this with functions. Okay, so for functions, usually we would do something like this. We'll create an expression, so we'll say get sum1 equals to function, and function takes in, let's say, x and y, and it returns x plus y. All right, and then we could just simply call it by saying get sum1. We'll pass in 1 and 1, and we need to console log it. And we get 2. Now we could use the new keyword here and use a constructor as well. So we'll say get sum2, set it to new function, which looks very weird, but we could pass in inside quotes num1, or actually let's not use num1, let's use x and y like we did. So x, y, and in here this is going to be the function body. So the last set of arguments will be the actual body, so we'll say return 1 plus 1. So now let's go down here and let's change it to get sum2, and we get 2. Okay, so this looks really weird to me. Now we can also do this with objects. Okay, so if we were to say, normally we would do like, let's do John equals name John. Okay, so that's fine. We can console.log John. But we could also do const John2. Actually, we'll call this one John1. And we could do new object and then wrap in here name John. All right, and if we console log John2, you can see we get the same thing. All right, so I mean, there's not much difference here, but obviously this is easier. But it's not like we're doing primitives up here where it's actually not using a primitive, it's using an object. Same thing with arrays, and I think I already showed you guys that you could use this way, but normally we would do, let's say array1 equals, and we'll set us some brackets, put some numbers in there, but you could also do const array2 and set it to new array like that, and then pass in your value. All right, and if we want to console log array2, there we go. Array1 will give us the same thing. Okay, so that's arrays. Now we also have the regexp constructor, and this is for regular expressions. Now we haven't gone over regular expressions yet, so you're probably not going to understand what's going on here, but if we wanted to create a regular expression, what we would do is wrap it in 2 forward slashes, and then put the expression. So what I'm going to do in this case is put a \w, which represents a word character, and then I'm going to put a plus. So this expression means that we're looking for a word character that occurs one or more times. So that's an easy way to do it, but you could also do new regexp, and then you could pass the expression in here. Now if we were to do /w plus like that and save, let's go ahead and first console log re1, and we get our expression, okay, wrapped in these slashes, these forward slashes. If we were to do 2, now remember it's just this, it's \w plus. Let's look at 2, and we just get w plus. We don't get our backslash, and we need that. So when you use regexp like this, you actually have to escape your characters like slashes, and you escape with a backslash. So we would actually have to do this to get the same as this. So if I save it now, you'll see we get the backslash. All right, and this may be confusing to you because we haven't gone over regular expressions, but just know that you do have to do your escaping when you do it this way, and you don't when you just wrap it in forward slashes. All right, so I mean, you know, there's not too many uses for this, for doing it this way. I would suggest, you know, creating your primitive values as you normally would. The arrays and objects and so on, I mean, it's not going to really hurt you, but it does slow things down. The execution time will be a little slower, so you generally want to stay away from this kind of thing, new object, new array, and stick to this method. All right, but like I said, I did want to mention it just so you guys know that these are available. All right, so in the next video, we're going to jump back into object-oriented programming, and we're going to take a look at prototypes, which often confuse many people.